So there is an idea that every individual has a way of giving and receiving love. This is what is referred to as love language and can be broken down into 5 categories: words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and the giving of gifts. As a viewer of Bonanza, one of the first things that should stand out the deeper you get into the molding of the characters into who they turn out to be over the course of the series' run is that Ben Cartwright is very open with his affection toward all of his sons. It is one of the things that makes the show unique and still holds up and even inspires a new group of viewers all these years later. Something else that may stand out to a new viewer of the show, and is even stated outright more than once, is that each of Ben's sons has a wildly different personality from the other 2. This is by design and is sometimes attributed to the fact that each has a different mother. Whether or not this is the case, an argument can be made for either side. None of them had their mothers around more than 5 years at the high end, and that was only for Joe. This gets us into a nature versus nurture discussion that I will save for another day. In the meantime, I, as always, welcome your thoughts. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to present and explain how Ben's primary love language is different with each son and how there are certain types that are present for all 3. In this video, I'm hoping to explore how those different personalities affect the love language given to them by Ben, or perhaps more aptly, are the cause of it. I feel it's fitting to start with Joe and work our way backwards, as the relationship between Ben and Joe is perhaps the most noted one in the entire show, next to Joe's relationship with Hoss. Ben's physical expression of love is most noted in the case of Joe. There are countless episodes where we find Ben hugging a crying Joe or putting a hand behind his back or around his neck. The question becomes, does Joe just openly accept affection more than the other 2, or is it that he was just given more of it in his younger life? He's the youngest child, and there's a decent gap in age between him and the other 2, made more noticeable with Adam than with Hoss. Joe is also the only one of the 3 who we never see as a child in the flashback episodes. We only see Hoss as a newborn, while we see Adam as both newborn and around the age of 5. But we never see Joe as, well, little at all. I'm basically saying we never see little in little Joe. We hear stories of his younger years more than any of the 3, but we never see it. I think it would have been interesting to see how Ben was toward Joe, and if having Joe's mother for longer than he had the other 2 wives made any difference in how he raised Joe in Joe's younger years. We can only go by what we see through and do our best to fill in the gaps in our own minds, and in some cases, our own fanfiction stories. That being said, Joe remains the one who is given the most physical affection by his father. As I stated earlier, we only ever get to see Hoss as an infant and only hear about his childhood beyond that point from comments made by the other members of the family. What we do know is that Hoss is a big fella. There's a scene in the episode Feet of Clay where Hoss is in tears because he's had to kill a man in self-defense, whose son Hoss has grown close to and who now hates him for it. Ben looks as though he wants to hug him, and if the scene weren't so sad, it might be a little amusing how much taller Hoss is standing next to Ben. So taken in that context, it's understandable how there is little less hugging going on between Ben and Hoss when Hoss is an adult. As much as we all just want to hug him, it might not be so easy. Perhaps for this reason, among others, acts of service and quality time are more Ben's love language for Hoss. Physical touch comes into play whenever Hoss is hurt, but the majority of the time it's the other love language types which are present between them. And finally, we get to perhaps the most tricky relationship in the show, Ben and Adam. When I started out with the idea for this video, I was initially going to cover this one alone, but I thought it would flow better mentioning the other ones, and why not do a deep dive into all of them if I'm gonna just go ahead and talk about them. One of the reasons why The Crucible is my favorite episode in the series is that scene at the end where Ben cradles Adam as he sobs on the ground. Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. No matter which son is your favorite, that scene stands out to most people if they've ever seen it. There are a few others where we see him put his arm around his eldest son's shoulders, but an actual emotional embrace moment doesn't happen beyond the crucible. One might argue that maybe Adam just isn't a hugger. And to that, I would mention the very first episode of the show, A Rose for Lotta. Joe and Adam have one of the sweetest embraces of the series, and it happens immediately after they beat the snot out of each other and go so far as to insult each other's dead moms. Yeah, I hate that part of it, but it exists, and we can't change that. Thankfully, they all grew from that moment. Adam is the only member of the core four that never has a birthday episode. They never even mention his birthday except in the flashback of his actual birth. We don't see much in the way of gift-giving in that relationship, mainly due to that fact that I believe was a misfire on the part of the show. It stands to reason, as Adam was Ben's first experience of fatherhood, and that the woman who was supposed to go on that journey with him died right after Adam was born, that mistakes were made with Adam that were not made with the others. This is understandable for a few reasons, of course. However, it does perhaps explain this lack of emotionally vulnerable moments between father and eldest son. An example in the episode where we meet Hoss's mother, Ben chastises Adam for playing with his mother's music box, the one that she was holding when she died. Did all of this make Adam a little standoffish toward physical affection? Was he unintentionally taught that being emotional wasn't an option for him since he was the eldest and had to take care of everybody else? Maybe. So that leaves us with words of affirmation. Ben does give his firstborn advice and verbal support when he asks for it. Those old thoughts of not really knowing how to handle Adam, left over from having to raise him alone while dealing with the loss of his first love, took their toll. I'm not saying at all that Ben hasn't given Adam reasons to believe he loves him. It's never not obvious that Ben loves Adam. I just think that love looks different and can sometimes be a little harder to notice when measured against all the hugging on Joe or quality time spent with both Joe and Hoss. None of this is to say that there aren't some aspects of the love language scale that are universal to all three. Words of affirmation can be found from Ben toward all three of his sons at one time or another. That is another aspect of the show that fans take away from it. Ben's fatherly advice has helped us all just as it's helped the sons receiving it. There's some degree of physical touch in each relationship. One of the most glaring acts of service is the fact that the Ponderosa itself is meant as a legacy for all three sons to enjoy. Ben states more than once that working together as a family to preserve the land is meant as an exercise in togetherness, and that may just be the most wholesome aspect of the four Cartwrights as a family. That was Ben's greatest gift to his sons. Ben's real act of service is to provide a lasting gift to all of his sons in the form of fostering a relationship between the three and a place to call home that gives them a chance to spend quality time together while they build it. As the show went on, Ben Cartwright grew as a character and became more affectionate to all of his sons and a lot less critical of them. This development made him into one of the greatest fathers in TV history, and through these expressions of his love language, Ben was able to teach us all that love is universal, and it takes nothing away from a rugged, manly man to show love to his sons and have them show it to each other. So what did I miss? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and happy Love Month.